Welcome to the Thought Leaders video blog, where industry executives share their insights and vision in today's landscape of live entertainment.
So Jonathan Mark, CEO of Dynamic Pricing Partners, thanks for joining us on Thought Leaders.
Thanks, Craig. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, so Jonathan, obviously 2020 was an interesting year in our industry, and 2020 in college football, I'm sure it presented some interesting pricing trends. Can you talk about that? What did you see this year, and what do you anticipate to see next year?
Yeah, I think in 2020, when reduced capacity was first talked about, we all thought it would be very easy to sell out reduced capacity. I
Mhm.
think there were certainly some challenges early on. We saw some trends with partners and across the NCAA that fans had concerns, whether it was COVID or economic. There were definitely concerns early on. You did sort of see a tipping point as we moved into October, where more fans were coming to games. You did start to see pricing increase. Price did not really affect demand overall. We ran lots of tests for our partners throughout the year and saw that in most cases, pricing did not drive incremental fans. And so I think that's certainly a big theme that we've always seen in many cases. But knowing that, it was just a matter of, is this fan willing to attend a game during the current environment? And I think many fans already made that decision. So we really encouraged our partners to hold price as is and make sure that they were providing the best possible experience, but not giving up revenue, as we knew it would probably not drive that incremental consumer or fan to the game. I think another trend we saw were scan rates. Certainly early on, scan rates were much lower than expected. So fans did purchase tickets, they just weren't showing up. And that was not just public fans, but also students, faculty, and staff. And so I think we did start to see scan rates increase. I know it's been challenging right now for our partners, during basketball season, where scan rates have certainly been a bit lower than expected. But overall, football, they did start to increase towards the end of the season.
Great. So you talked about basketball a little bit. Are you seeing any other trends in basketball? Obviously, there's less fans in the stands than there was in football, but anything else that's popping off the page yet here for basketball?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very different experience going to a whether NBA or college basketball game relative to a football game. Football, you're buying a ticket for the tailgating aspect, the whole experience outside the stadium, and then the game itself. For basketball, a lot of times you're going to the game, you're showing up. Maybe there's some entertainment, but you're not buying that entire external experience. So for most of our partners, we've seen renewal rates increase and opt-in rates increase relative to football. And so more fans were comfortable attending basketball, knowing that, they weren't going to be out there for an 8-hour event. And it would be 2 hours, they'd enjoy the experience and they'd go home. So I think that is positive going forward as we come out of COVID. Fans want to attend these games, and knowing that ultimately, they are becoming more comfortable attending games. And when they're not expecting a full experience, they're okay with that in basketball relative to football. Other than that, I mean, we have seen pricing actually hold up in many cases, much better than expected. So again, as I mentioned before, we're not seeing price drive demand. And so, again, really encouraging our partners to hold pricing firm and not discount, because we're not seeing that drive that additional fan to the game. And so because of that, we are seeing trends on both the secondary market and the primary market pricing much higher. And I think that can go a long way in really retraining the consumer to ultimately purchase tickets at the face value, or at the market value on the secondary earlier on. We actually, and going back, sorry to digress a bit, but going back to football too, we saw fans purchase much earlier in the event life cycle than they normally would. So historically, and I'm sure you've seen, Craig, over the past, I don't know, 10 years, every single year fans are purchasing later and later. And so, now it was actually much earlier in the cycle they were purchasing. And I don't think that trend will ultimately continue, but it'll be interesting to watch. The other thing too, I forgot to touch on is the pack sizes, or the size of groups that people were purchasing tickets in. Pairs were the largest or the most often purchased group by far. Typically about 60% in football. We're seeing the same trends in basketball as well. And so it was almost as if fans were trading down to a smaller group size. And also, we're paying a little bit more on a per ticket basis for those pairs. So that's something that's going to be interesting to watch coming out of COVID it'll be interesting to see what type of capacities our football partners are able to have this fall.
Yeah, for sure. We're hoping for 100%. We'll see. We'll see how
Yeah,
it plays out. So really interesting
definitely.
about the pricing piece and don't give away revenue. So that's great insight, Jonathan. Thank you. So let's talk
Sure.
about sales strategy. And I know you've had some discussions recently with some partners. What do you think is going to be some changes in sales strategies going into next year's football season?
Yeah, so we actually we hosted a roundtable yesterday, and we touched on this quite a bit with partners. And I think starting earlier has been really valuable for many partners, even despite the uncertainty. So despite not knowing, is there going to be full capacity? Are we going to have the same seats? Fans, have all this money that they haven't spent for the past at least year right now, and so I just read an article, consumer savings is at an all-time high, and they're looking to do something with that money. So from a sales perspective, we've encouraged our partners to start selling earlier on. You don't need a hard deadline March 1st, which we'll typically see. And so we have seen most of our really all of our partners become much more flexible with timelines, starting earlier, and maybe it's a softer sell earlier on, and then going with more defined deadlines, even though they're more still a soft deadline later on than we normally would. But we saw partners last year, particularly schools that didn't have fans, start the renewal process. Last football season in November and December, we saw some Big Ten and Pac-12 schools do that. And I think the trend has always been to start earlier every single year, and it's almost kind of like the as fans are purchasing later, teams are asking them to renew earlier, and I think that trend will still continue. But I think starting earlier on gives you more of a runway room based on all the different outcomes. And I know Pat Yolen's been working hard, particularly the past 9 months or so, on all the different capacity scenarios with partners, as have we. And I think starting earlier on just gives you the ability to adjust much more quickly than if you wait till the last minute and start renewing in June when there's more clarification or defined expected outcomes. I think that's going to be a bit more challenging. So
great insight. So what do you think is the biggest opportunity in 21?
Yeah, I mean, I think number one, well, I don't know if this is the most challenging opportunity, I like to say, which is also the biggest opportunity, is to really redefine your brand. And we talked about this yesterday again in this roundtable, but really coming up with a new way to get fans back into the building. In many cases, like the Big Ten, like the Pac-12, they haven't been there in nearly 2 years. When we get to this fall, that's a very long time. And I know everyone's been focused on fan engagement and really driving home the value of attending the live event. But now is the time to really recreate and reinvent what you've been doing. And we've seen many partners, and I'm excited for what I think they'll continue to develop. Whether it's some type of virtual type experience that you can now bring into the live setting, whether it's some type of complete theme that you're going to go off of for the upcoming season. Fans want to be a part of that. They have money to spend. So I think that's the biggest opportunity. Is we've had by that time nearly 18 months to try new things, and many have worked, many have not worked. But I think every single school has learned what has worked, and I think they're going to continue to develop. And I think I've never seen an excitement level to try new things from the collegiate community as much as I have right now. And they're willing to really try anything and to see what works. One area that we talked about yesterday as well that I think is really valuable are these fan boxes or fan packs, whatever you want to call them. Many schools have generated seven figures of revenue selling those that they never thought was even possible. And I think something like that to bring the excitement back to the fan, to get them thinking about a particular sport or particular school, that's a major opportunity. And if you can tap into those revenue generating programs now, I think they'll still be there with you. And when we get back into the stadium, and ideally you keep those going. So hopefully it becomes incremental revenue in addition to ticketing revenue or donation revenue down the road. So
yeah, great point. I love to see all the innovation in the community, and fans responded, right? They're excited for their team, so they want to support them.
definitely.
So what
Definitely.
pieces of advice are you sharing with your clients right now? We've got a lot of overlapping clients in the Paculin and DPP communities. What advice are you sharing?
Sure. Yeah, so I think be fan first. Be very flexible with your fans. Everybody in this in the country, let alone the world, has gone through a lot this past year or so.
Yeah.
And so I think empathy is extremely important. Being able to be flexible. Somebody can't pay, but they can pay later on. That's okay. Right now you want to do whatever it takes to win that fan back and bring them back to the building. And if that means, having a flexible or super flexible payment plan, or if it means, keeping their seats because they can't afford them this year, keeping them for the following year, that's okay too. I think you really don't want to do anything to hurt the fan. I think paying attention to all levels of fans, and so there's always a lot of great ideas and value that you can provide to your top level of donor base. But there's also a lot of value you can provide to that lower tier level that might not donate as much because they can't afford it, but also wants a similar type of experience. And so, whether it's having a coach talk via webinar with 500 people versus a one-on-one with a high-level donor, it can provide a really cool, unique experience. So going back to kind of trying new things, making sure to be very fan first, fan friendly, very flexible. And then on the pricing side, again, being very firm on pricing. I wouldn't recommend, and we haven't recommended really anyone to increase prices for their season ticket holders. And on a case by case basis, maybe for new fans, but for the most part, really keep pricing as is. I don't think you need to lower it because, as I said before, we don't think you're really gonna generate that new incremental fan from lowering it. There's a lot of value into what schools or teams can provide at a football or basketball game. But I think really holding pricing, I think, is going to be key. And then trying to provide as much of an in-game experience as you can, just within whatever limitations we have. And hopefully kind of those limitations are gone. But that's really been our focus. And then, from a renewal standpoint, one of our partners has built out kind of this 4 bucket model, and Kansas State has done that, and then they've done a really good job. Yep. And I think really bucketing your fans into various different segments from a renewal basis, making sure that you can drive as much value to each of those different unique buckets as possible, and then doing whatever it takes to get them to renew. And fans, want to renew, that's for sure. It's just selling the story and or telling the story and selling the value of attending a live event. And I think 2021 is going to be much better than 2020. It's I think 2022 is going to be amazing, and so that's how we're really thinking about it. 2021, there's a lot of unknowns, and we're all hoping for the best. But I think everybody needs to be as flexible as they were in 2020, and we saw it across the board, because you never know what's going to come up or what's going to happen, or a schedule change, or like games can't be postponed. I mean, there's a lot of things that are going to most likely happen, and you just want to be prepared for them.
Yeah, great point. So one of the big trends in 2020 was mobile, right, and contactless. So talk to me about the impact of mobile and ease of transferability of tickets, specifically on the secondary market.
Yeah, definitely. So I think what mobile is really going to do, and Pat Gillen's done a great job with this, but you're putting the power back into the hand of the school or content rights holder. And so in this instance, with hard tickets or with PDFs, you didn't know everyone in your building. you maybe knew that initial purchaser, but if you're working with companies in the secondary market and they're uploading PDFs, you don't know all of that secondary market or secondary consumer data. So now with mobile, I mean, it's I think going to be game changing. You're going to know every single consumer in the building, or at least that head of that household or head of that group. And I think that's really key. It's going to create a lot of friction, which I think is outstanding for non-sanctioned or non-partnered companies. And I think those companies are probably not acting in the best interest of that school or university. And so I think mobile will allow, again, the school to access all of that data. With the University of Alabama, we were able to generate 5,000 new customers or fans that weren't in their database working with them last year. And that was actually a smaller scale than what we've done before. But I still think that's key, because those are all consumers that they didn't have data on and they weren't in their system that they can now target for season, mini plans, donations. And I think that's going to be really important going forward, is you're always trying to find that new fan. And if you don't have them in your footprint, it's very challenging. And so working with the right partner in the secondary that will transfer those tickets, and working with Pacquiao to make sure everything's set up properly for that, will really allow you to have all of that customer data. And I know sales teams will certainly appreciate all of those new customer leads or sales leads that they can capture from that data. So mobile it's outstanding. I think there's a footprint beyond just the ticket, right? I think whether it's concessions and in-game ordering and things along those lines, there's a whole host of unique experiences and targeting that you can derive from that mobile consumer data. And I think that's really going to be game changing going forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so does Pacquiao, obviously. So
yeah.
Last question, hard hitting. So we're deep into conference basketball. Who do you like in the Final Four this year?
Yeah. So most of my partners will know this about me. I can tell you any section or row in a stadium, but I'm not as good with who's playing with players or things along those lines. So I'm gonna go with Kansas. Kansas is near and dear to Joe, who works on my team's heart, and so I'm gonna go with Kansas winning the championship this year. But again, I mean, I would not take that to DraftKings or one of the online sports books with that advice. That's for sure.
All right, so I'm making my bet right now. Kansas. I heard it from here.
Yeah, exactly.
Jonathan, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Craig.
Thank you for joining the Thought Leaders video blog. And remember, everyone can step up and be a leader in their own way. We look forward to seeing you next time.